Hey folks, we're on to section 1.4 here. This is why database design is important. We're talking about why we design databases the way we do, and I don't think I spelled any of that right. My goodness. That's not how you spell important. That's funny. Important. All right, so you might be familiar with a tool like Excel. So a lot of times we use this idea of Excel to kind of illustrate what a single table in a database looks like. The idea of a table is I have a bunch of rows and I have a bunch of columns. So let me see if Excel will fire up here, and maybe we'll do another quick little one here. So we can say, hey, here are my columns. So I'll have, this is the employee name, and this is the job title, and then maybe I'll have a certification, certification 1, certification 2, maybe I'll have skill 1, skill 2, skill 3, and skill 4, and this is going to get really tedious really quick here. But say, okay, let's track our employees. So we've got Eric here, professor, certification. I've got, actually, don't have all that many official certifications. What I do have is a CNA, actually, from way long ago here. Didn't bother taking some of the other ones here. And then some skills in here. You might say, hey, how about C# or Java or database design and implementation. How about data analytics? And on and on and on here. And, you know, sure, we can list all these skills. And then maybe we'll have Professor Ian. And nope, that's CNA, and he has all sorts of cool certifications. I forget all of them. They're Oracle, XYZ, ABC, something or other, Oracle, something. And so if we list his skills, maybe we say this is DB design, and then maybe we say data warehousing, and on and on and on. And we can list more and more skills. But what's going to happen here is when you want to look for somebody with a particular skill, maybe here we listed it as DB design. Maybe here I spelled out database design and implementation. And it's just going to get this really ugly list here where they're not all going to match. We're going to have some data inconsistencies. So designing how we're going to store our data is really important. And especially even just like with employee name, if I add my last name here, and I had Ian's name here. Now, can we sort these by last name if we wanted to get some like alphabetical listing? That's not going to work very well because they're just one field. When you go to sort, they're going to sort by first name. Right? So designing databases and making sure that we get nice discrete pieces of information and to reduce the redundancies is really huge. So what we would do instead, we would actually add other tables here. So we'd leave this one as like the employee table. We could add another table here, and maybe we call this one, this could be certifications. And then maybe we'd add another table. That's not spelled right, but that's okay for now. And maybe we'd have skills. And in here, then we can list them out. Like skill 1, skill 2, skill 3, right? Or, you know, skill ID 1, 2, and 3. And then maybe here we'd have database design. Maybe we'd have data warehousing, data analytics. Maybe we'd have some programming ones. We could add our C#, we could add our Java, that sort of thing, and on and on and on. But that way, each skill is only listed once. And then same with certifications. We could list out each certification here one time. So ID 1 and 2, right? Could be some Oracle thing. It could be a CNA thing, on and on, CNA thing. It could be on and on and on. And then an employee, we no longer list them individually here because we don't need to have that redundant data. What we would do then is we would say, okay, well, what is the list of skills that you have? And again, actually adding it here is also going to be awkward. There's another way of doing it. So we'll say, hey, I want an employee ID here. You can say ID. And so I'll be employee 1, you'll be employee 2. And then we add another table here. And this is going to be my employee certifications. So employee certifications then would have information like the employee ID and the certification ID. We'd say, okay, employee ID number 1 has certification number 2. Employee number 2 has certification number 1, employee 2 has certification number 2, employee 2 has certification number 3, and on and on and on and on. And every different employee, every certification they have would be another entry, another row in this table. right? Where the row represents an instance of that whatever we have here. So this is each employee gets its own row. So if we design our database well, we're able to reduce the redundant data, and then it makes it easier to find people who have those certifications and skills that we want. Not only making sure we don't have redundant data, but then I can just look in this list here and see, okay, who has this right certificate or who has this right skill. Before I had to say, oh, let me look across 3 or 4 different skill fields here and see maybe it's skill 1, maybe it's skill 2, maybe it's skill 3, maybe it's skill 4. Who knew which one it was listed in? It's going to be a lot harder to find it. So if we design our database right, it makes all of this easier for us to use and reduces the redundancy. So the book will actually show you some basic SQL or SQL commands that you could run if you had a database. So we don't actually have the database right now. We'll work on playing with a real database later where we can start doing some queries on them. But that's the syntax that you'll start looking at. Again, we'll get to that in chapter 7, so don't worry too much about it now. But they want to throw it out there so you start seeing what it looks like and you can kind of get a feel for what it's going to do when you run some of these queries here. So when we have all these different tables, we also need to understand the relationship. Remember, one of the things metadata is the relationships, right? So this is reducing redundancy. Redundancy. Right? We want to reduce redundancy. We want to simplify search. Right? We want to remove what are those? The like data entry errors. So if I were to say, hey, skill number 2, I'm not typing out database administration or Oracle certified database administrator, because you're likely to typo something. And one of the sad things about how the way things work, most often the people doing the data entry are paid the least. And we'll just be honest, when you're paid not very much, you don't care very much. Right? If you're getting paid crappily to do this, you're not all that invested in making sure that you're doing a 100% perfect job every time. And if you make a typo, you make a typo, right? It's not too big of a deal. So if they're entering the same word every single time and having the redundant data or having those data entry errors, that's going to help reduce that by good database design.